If I could give you one piece of advice for 2024, it would be to make sure that your emotional regulation skills are on point all year long, and that those emotional regulation skills involve all aspects of your being, including your physical body, your nervous system, as well as your spiritual body. And so that's the major theme for 2024. If I could put it in a sentence, it's integrated healing through especially the physical, spiritual, and emotional parts of your being. And this podcast episode is going to dive a little bit into the astrology of why. And so first, I'd like to extend you a warm welcome to the Horoscopes podcast. I'm your host, Rosemary Holbrook. I'm a Vedic sidereal astrologer, meaning I use not only the Vedic system of astrology, but the Vedic system has different tools and techniques than the Western system, or if you're in a Western country, probably what you know as just astrology. The Vedic system has different tools and techniques. But a major important difference about Vedic astrology to Western astrology is that it uses the sidereal zodiac. So everything I'm using in this episode and all episodes is based around the sidereal zodiac, which is about a whole sign off. It's 26 degrees. The sign is 30 degrees. So it's almost an entire sign off from Western astrology, or what you might just hear out there in the wild world of the internet as astrology. So just that little preface, extend you a warm welcome. Typically on a Horoscopes podcast episode, I will give you yoga practices and journal prompts for whatever's happening, but by nature of the super long-term ness of this episode, the long-term nature of this episode that is for the whole year, I'm just going to tell you that for the whole year, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, because also this episode is a repurposing of my office hours from the 100 Healers Circle, which is my membership that I offer. If you go to yogiscopes.com/membership, actually it's closed down right there right now. Anyway, I have weekly office hours, and this week it's a holiday week. Nobody showed up live. So when that happens, I just talk about something. I actually had planned this week to do a shorter rundown, a high level overview. And then in the yearly planning party that I talked about, we'll get more in depth, more nitty gritty. That's happening on January 27th. I talked about it in the episode. So this is just a repurposing of that. So I just wanted to say that ahead of time so that you know, that I'm talking about some things that are within the membership. And when I say that you just have access to that, like, just know that I mean folks in the 100 Healer Circle. And if you want to join, I said I was going to shut it down, but I didn't, because it's been holiday week. And something I mentioned in the episode too is in the weeks between winter solstice, December 21st, and Makar Sankranti, which is January 15th, when Sun moves into Capricorn, it is like a time for hibernation. And I want you to lean into that energy. I'm leaning into that energy. Talked about it on the episode. So anyway, I'm not really doing anything extra, which means I said I was going to shut down signups for the Mercury retrograde challenge. Well, I didn't. So if you just go to yogiscopes.com/challenge, that's how you'll get into the 100 Healers Circle if you want to right now. You can sign up for it, even though the challenge is almost over. And I actually announced the winner of the challenge because it's by a landslide on the episode. So here's your high level overview for 2024. And so you can listen to it and you can hear the astrology of why I say the things that I did, but mainly your yoga practices will be I hope you have a yoga practice all year, because as you may know, that's something I talk about constantly, that the reason yoga, and especially when you pair it with astrology, is so healing is because it helps us be in better touch with our emotions through the study of astrology and how those are landing in our body through this practice of yoga. So if you have some kind of practice that helps you do that all year long, you'll be golden. That's kind of my point always. If you just, whatever helps you maintain some sort of body and emotional awareness practice, you'll be fine, right? So here we go. Without further ado, here is the recording. Take good care of yourself now and always. This Mercury retrograde thing just happened to me. I just was running my mouth for like a couple minutes going off with the office hours, and I realized that I was muted the whole time. I've done that before, and it was actually also during Mercury retrograde. But good thing is this time I realized it. It was actually during our very first ever Mercury retrograde challenge when I was announcing the winner the last time I did that. So that's funny. Happened again. None of us are impervious to Mercury retrograde, but I find with the challenge activities, that's why we do it. That's why I still do it, the challenge, every time, because with that increased grounding through meditation practice, and what have you, the other practices I've been doing, I gave my office a major clean last week. That was partly related to the fact that our office doubles as a guest bedroom. See this couch that you'll sometimes see me sitting on? Those little foam cushions go there, and the back part folds out and it turns into a king size bed. So when we have visitors in town, they sleep in my office. And so anyway, I hit record and was just talking, and it was muted. So I was like, you know what? Nobody's here. I'm just going to start the recording over. And I think we're good. I think it's recording. I think I'm not muted. I think everything's fine now. So this office hours is it's going to be a very brief, very high level overview for 2024. That's what we're doing today. And I feel like I'm repeating myself, even though none of you would have heard me. We will still have our yearly planning event on January 7th, which is Sunday, not this coming up Sunday, like 3 or 4 days from now, Sunday, New Year's Eve, but a week from then, January 7th, which I think will be a really good time. I think, I personally have been really trying to start planning my year and doing all the stuff that I do every end of the year, beginning of the year. But my energy just hasn't been there because of Mercury retrograde, Jupiter retrograde. Like I've been doing it some, but I feel like the clarity's not there, if that makes sense for me. And so I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be a good thing to do our planning for the year. After Jupiter's direct, Jupiter and Mercury both go direct on January 1st on New Year's Day. So I think it'll be really good to do the planning once they have gone direct. I think maybe Mercury will be back in Sagittarius by then. Actually, I can look at it on the planner on the transits by sign page. Let me tell you, that page is so handy. So I'm going to give you, I already said this, but this is the thing. I feel like I'm repeating myself, even though I'm kind of not. In the yearly planning party, I would encourage you to still come if you can make it or watch the recording, because we will do, we've kind of been working through some of this between the new moon in Scorpio, what included some journaling around kind of releasing 2023 and considering emotionally what you perhaps want either the next lunar cycle or the entire next year, 2024, to feel like, and what behaviors and activities and situations in your life contribute to either the feelings that you don't want to have anymore, the feelings you do want to cultivate more of. So we investigated some of that. And throughout the month of December in our office hours and other happenings, we've been kind of doing similar stuff that we will do in the yearly planning party, but I would encourage you to do it anyway because of one thing that I just mentioned about when the beginning of January will just be better for it. Yeah. So January 7th, actually. Okay. Yeah. I knew I look at this stuff when I schedule things, and January 7th, Mercury will move to Sagittarius and the sun will be in Sagittarius then too. That's just when there's heightened Sagittarius energy, it's really good for setting your vision. Sagittarius is all about broadening your horizons and having this philosophical vision. That's a very good use of Sagittarius energy. So the things like we do in the yearly planning party to set your vision for the year. And then as things start to trickle into Capricorn energy later in January and even into February, when Mars and Venus will both move into Capricorn in February. And Capricorn is way more about that, like getting down and dirty, doing the work kind of thing, if that makes sense. So they're all important pieces to the puzzle, as I've been describing in our office hours, like when in the Mercury retrograde office hours, I gave some greater context to this Mercury retrograde and was like, well, it's all, we move through Scorpio energy where it's really about getting under the surface and tending to your emotional being. And then after having done that, your use of Sagittarius energy of that, getting into what's your philosophy for life and what's your vision of how you're going to bring that philosophy more into reality. That's kind of the Sagittarius transitioning to Capricorn energy. And so they're all important steps to the puzzle, right? To the process. And those energies get heightened around this time of year. So I think it's makes a lot of sense that we always have people setting their New Year's resolution. That's such a Sagittarius thing. That's so like, what's my vision for the year, right? And it's all part of it. And we could even go back to Virgo energy, that starts hitting in the fall, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, which I'm pretty sure all of you are. Even if you're not in the US or in the Northern Hemisphere, Virgo energy in the fall, this is something we'll talk about in the yearly planning party too. Virgo energy is like peeling back, like shedding at the fall, at the harvest, that peeling back. And then Libra is very like harvest energy, so you kind of peel back and harvest and then share your harvest with your friends. It's like Thanksgiving we see here in the US, and even in Canada they have a different day, but I guess Canada does Thanksgiving too. That's like Libra energy. And then we move into Scorpio, where it's like things are getting dark. We're getting maybe moody about it, maybe getting the big sad. I don't know, whatever. And so that's the context of the year. And so that kind of stuff we will talk about in the yearly planning party more in depth about how it's going to shake out in 2024, because we see the sun, Venus, Mercury largely moving through the signs in that same order every year. And it can fluctuate some based on Venus retrogrades, Mercury retrogrades, but the sun stays on track all the time. The sun doesn't go retrograde. And so that's what I guess in paganism they would call the wheel of the year. And so that's an example of something we'll talk about more in depth in the yearly planning party. Today, I want to give you a more in-depth, or not more in-depth, a more high-level overview of big energies of 2024 to be on the lookout for, be aware of. And it makes sense because Mercury retrogrades back to Scorpio today. Mars is in its Gandanta zone between Scorpio and Sagittarius, moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius today, as I'm recording this, Thursday, December 28th. And that, interestingly, serendipitously, has a lot to do with the energies of 2024 that I'm about to tell you. But I was going on that tangent. I just went on rambling to tell you that the yearly planning party, even though we've been kind of touching on pieces of it in office hours over the past few weeks, I think that's kind of my goal for these office hours anyway, is to help stay on track. Like, we'll have our monthly workshops and whatever stuff to get more in depth with stuff we're talking about. And the office hours are like little reminders to stay on track with stuff, because it's more than a once a month practice, right? Keeping astrology as a themed intention setting practice. So this is your high level overview of 2024. And we will get in the yearly planning party, I'll guide you through the journaling. So even if you've already gotten your planner and you've already done the journaling, you certainly can. And this is one of those things I can't remember now if I said this in the recording that I was muted on, or if I said it in this one, but whatever, it bears repeating. I've already been doing the journaling in my planner. I've already been using it, but I've experienced, because of Mercury retrograde and Jupiter retrograde, that my clarity just hasn't been there. And so I'm excited to go ahead and do it again. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do too much revisiting your intent. Well, I guess you can do too much. You can get a little bit overthinking about it, right? There is a line somewhere, but that's why I've designed the planner the way that I have, to keep you on track with your intention, your overall intention. And so hopefully, if you've been coming to or watching the recording of the office hours as much as you can, it's always like the office hours are way informal. They're like, if you miss them, I don't want you to feel bad about it ever. and just make it when you can, watch the recording when you can. It's not that serious. It's usually a recap or a reiteration of information I've said somewhere else that just might help you make it click in a new way. Because we all learn through repetition. Anyway, I think the clarity will be better by January 7th because we'll have all the planets will be direct at that point, pretty much, with the exception of maybe Uranus. I don't know. It's not that serious. The outer planets don't matter that much. But the major players that can fog up our clarity will be direct by then. We'll be pretty well into Sagittarius energy, and January 7th is just a really good time. It's a good time to do the kind of work that we will do in the yearly planning party. And so I don't want you to think that we're not going to talk about it. We will get nitty gritty and in depth there. And so now I just want to point out a few things that are kind of setting the tone for the entire year that are perhaps different from any other year. And so the things that are pretty similar every year are like the sun, Venus, and Mercury. And that's so we see, like pagans call it the wheel of the year, where it's like in the springtime, we're going through this like new growth, abundance, things are starting to pop off. And then in the summertime, things are a little chaotic. We might be getting off of our routine. It's like retrograde season. These kind of things we see largely happen the same every year, and kind of move through the archetypes of the signs. Like I was just mentioning, like Virgo, in the fall, and that's so things you'll see in the important dates page on page 29 of your planner. Like when Venus is debilitated. And so I always encourage you not to be like freaked out by, oh my God, Venus is debilitated. Are all my relationships going to be off track? Am I just not going to make any money during that time? Like, no, it's just the beginning of fall where it's time to start shedding some layers because the days are kind of noticeably starting to get dark as we reach the fall equinox. Notice that's right around the fall equinox, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. And, you can't keep up at the clip that you've been living your life at all summer through the winter. So when Venus becomes debilitated, it's time to start peeling back. Same with when Venus is exalted in Pisces, happens in the spring when it's a time for inviting in all of this new abundance. And that's the wheel of the year, right? And so we can investigate that stuff and some techniques to like know how to apply it to your life more in the yearly planning party. But just some things about 2024 that are different from other years is that one, we do not have Saturn or Rahu or Ketu changing signs next year at all. And so, as you may hear me talk about frequently, the major karmic planets are Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, and Ketu. And so, in your birth chart and by transit, we really want to track what those planets are doing. More than the quicker moving planets, or what's sometimes referred to as the inner planets or personal planets of Mercury, Venus, the sun, the moon, and kind of Mars. Mars is like, it's like halfway between, it changes signs every 2 months, whereas Mercury, Venus, and the sun go about once a month, and it's largely the same every year with a little bit of difference due to retrogrades. But Mars it's almost lumped in there with the major karmic planets of Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, and Ketu, right? And so Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu are not changing signs at all next year, which means we won't have any major shifts of karmic energy, at least related to those planets. But I don't necessarily know that that's a good thing personally, because the shifts bring all this newness, all this like major shifts, and when they're not shifting, you're just like really in it. Usually you're really in whatever karmic lessons they are trying to teach you. And so I don't know. I just had a reading with somebody the other day who was like, when am I going to get relief from this stuff? And I was like, I hate to break it to you, but not until 2025 at least, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's like that, so it's like if you're struggling, if 2023 has been a big year of struggle, if the shifts this year have brought a lot of struggle for you, then I don't think that struggle will ease much next year. And that's sucks if that's the case. Sorry. But if it's not the case, if you have experienced a lot of shifts this year and it's been for the better and things feel like they are leveling out in a good way now-ish, then that will continue to be the energy in a big way for 2024. And so that's good news and bad news depending on how this year has felt for you. And that's the kind of stuff we can also dive more deeply into in the early planning party. I encourage you to try to come live if you can, because we will have time at the end where you can ask questions about your specific chart. No questions are off limits. You know what I mean? That would be a good time to do that. And office hours. Office hours are always a good time to ask questions about your own specific chart. And Kelly, if you've been listening this long, I'm totally planning to get to yours at the end. I was like hoping to see you today so we can talk about it, but I'll say some more things about your chart at the end after this, talking about 2024. So that's the things that are staying the same, right? And the other major things to be aware of changing next year is Jupiter changing signs. So Jupiter changes signs every year. So that's not unusual. Jupiter always changes signs, right? So Jupiter will move from Aries to Taurus in May, right before Akshaya Tritaya, which is, it's May 10th. It's Akshaya Tritaya, I think, is like, it's a good example of that spring energy I was talking about. It's like, it always happens. It's like the third lunar day. So third day after the new moon, because the new moon begins the lunar cycle. So it's the third day after the new moon in Vishaka, the month of Vishaka. So if that means nothing to you, don't worry about it. The important part is that it usually happens around late April or May. And it's when the moon and the sun are both exalted. So when the sun's exalted in Aries, the moon's exalted in Taurus. And so that just so happens that when there's a new moon in Taurus, in Aries, so the new moon is characterized by when the sun and moon are in the same sign. When they conjoin in the same sign, that makes a new moon. So it's always right after the new moon in Aries, which is also Lunar New Year, right? Because the sun is exalted in Aries, and then the moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So right after the new moon in Aries, the moon will move to Taurus. Both the sun and moon will be exalted, and it happens in the spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. That's what kind of feeds into the archetype of Akshaya Tritaya. It's an excellent day for new beginnings, which is, in fact, I have scheduled in my life. The next cohort of astrology for yogis will begin that day. So the next cohort's beginning in late January. And I want to go ahead and welcome Ronnie to that cohort, because obviously you've won the Mercury Retrograde Meditation Challenge already, even though it's not over. So anyway, that cohort will begin at the end of January. And then anyway, so that's how I apply this stuff to my life too. And it just actually worked out really well with the number of weeks and things and how I usually do it with that course. And so it's a good day for new beginnings. And so right before Akshaya Tritaya, Jupiter will move to Taurus, which is a good thing for, Taurus related endeavors, which are things like abundance, things like grounding yourself in comfort, things like having maybe a sort of spiritual reckoning or spiritual reconciliation with your family of origin and how that impacts your relationship to diet and abundance and like your money stories. That kind of stuff will all be major themes of Jupiter and Taurus, which we'll talk about more in depth as we get there. I always want to be mindful of not trying to make myself or any of you live in the future. So that's like the only major karmic shift happening next year. And other than that, in 2024, it will just be working through more of the same karmic energies of 2023, largely. Okay, if that makes sense. But the other thing I want to point out, related high level overview of 2024, is that we begin the year on a Monday. So let me back up and say why. So these are all going to be examples of why I say that the major theme of the year is emotional regulation and grounding yourself in that way, grounding yourself in healing and, so physical, spiritual, mental healing. And that will probably show up through working with your intuition and emotions, emotional regulation throughout the year. And there's a lot of reasons why. So we begin the year on a Monday. So we kind of look at those things to see how we want to look at the first day of the year and the last day of the year to see. It's just a technique to see how the year will sort of be bookended, if that makes sense. And so we're beginning the year on a Monday. We're ending the year on a Tuesday. So Monday's ruled by the moon, Tuesday's ruled by Mars. Ending the year on a Tuesday, that's a new moon. Okay. Kind of. So the new moon is technically on December 30th and the last day of the Monday, December 30th, the second new moon of December. And in December, we will have Mars retrograde. So ending the year on a Mars ruled day with Mars retrograde in moon ruled Cancer. Okay. So I'll explain that more. I want to tell you astrologically why. And then if that felt jargony, I'll say more about it. So basically, we're bookending the year with very much like moon and Mars energy, because we're also beginning the year with Mercury going direct in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. And Jupiter is in Aries at the beginning of the year. So we have this cycle of the year where moon, Mars, and Jupiter energies are heightened, if that makes sense. So what does that mean in practical sense is emotional regulation, right? And the other thing playing into this that I haven't really mentioned is that Rahu and Ketu are staying in Pisces and Scorpio, Pisces and Virgo all year, respectively. Rahu and Pisces, Ketu and Virgo. And so hopefully you were around during eclipse season and kind of paying attention to how that was playing out and the shifts that were happening then as Rahu and Ketu moved into Pisces and Scorpio. And if not, please revisit that stuff, because that's what I mean when I'm like, that energy has already begun, but it will continue to play out through 2024 and into 2025. So it's not a shift, but if anything, I think it will bring up those karmic, like you're going to be working with that karmic energy, karmic lessons, whatever, all year long. And so that's related to, just in a nutshell, you can go back and revisit the resources via the public podcast, as well as the sign by sign under longer term transits for Rahu and Pisces and Ketu and Virgo. But in a nutshell, those energies will be bringing up a big focus on the subconscious and spiritual healing, as well as embodying physical health. That's, if I could sum up that karma of Rahu and Pisces and Ketu and Virgo in like a sentence, that would be it. So focus on subconscious and spiritual healing while embodying physical health. And so that's throughout the year with Rahu and Ketu. And then the other thing we have is Jupiter moving from Aries to Taurus. So this shift from fiery energy to earthy energy in the middle of the year. But we're ending the year with Mars debilitated and retrograde. Mars retrograde in Cancer on the second new moon of December. So it's just, I hope that all makes sense to why I'm saying emotional regulation is going to be key for the entire year, because of all those things I mentioned, because we're beginning the year on a Monday with Mercury going direct in Scorpio, Jupiter going direct in Aries, right? These two Mars ruled signs. So Moon and Mars are really prominent on the first day of the year. They're also really prominent on the last day of the year, just in a different way. And the only major shift, karmic shift we have going on this year is Jupiter moving from Mars ruled Aries to Venus ruled Taurus, right around the time we have Akshaya Tritaya, which is Sun exalted in Aries and Moon exalted in Taurus. So I hope that all makes sense, that basically all that plays into saying the major theme of the year will be that healing in all levels of your being, but especially physical, emotional, spiritual, right? But that's pretty much, like that captures it, if that makes sense, like in a lot of ways. And then the financial thing comes in, especially when Jupiter moves into Taurus. Yeah, so that's the major themes of the year. That's your high level overview, and we'll talk more about it in the yearly planning party. So on January 7th, we will do some yoga, some very, very gentle yoga. Actually, probably just like 5-10 minutes of movement to get comfortable. And then we'll do a yoga nidra and guided journaling for setting your sankalpa. And we will do the guided journaling from the planner. And then, so this is how I always do it. So if you're new here, this will be new to you. If you're not new here, this will be a nice reiteration that the way I encourage you to approach any of this astrology stuff is that I always want to, like, it's like yoga first, then astrology, right? And so that's what I mean by that is we want to be embodied and aware of our own experience before we go trying to find answers from astrology, because we don't want to project the astrology onto our experience without first being really in touch with what our physical, mental, emotional experience is. And so that's why we always, when I do any workshop or anything, we always start with yoga and then journaling before I tell you about any of the astrology. So that's how it will go. If you've been to the yearly planning party before, be the same as years past. If you haven't been, we start with some gentle movement. You actually don't even really need a mat for it. It's like rolling around on the floor type stuff, not a vinyasa flow practice by any means. Super gentle to just get out of your head into your body. And then we'll do some journaling, guided journaling, and then I'll tell you more in depth, more nitty gritty than I just did, the astrology of 2024 to be on the lookout for. I'll break it down sort of quarterly. We'll kind of run through all of the stuff in the planner. So you'll want to make sure you have your planner handy so you can be taking notes if you want to. And then we'll have time for questions and answers. So if you want to ask questions about your specific chart, make sure you have it handy. Or just anything, right? We always have time at the end for Q&A. So it's kind of a long event. It can take up to 3 hours. So just plan on that if you can. And I always upload the recording if you can't make it live. And you can always send questions in advance by going to yogiscopes.com/Q&A. No spaces or dashes or anything. The letter Q-A-N-D-A. To submit your question, it redirects you to the Google form to submit your questions in advance if you can't make it live. And your questions can be anonymous or not. It's up to you. If you want me to, you can also give the option in the form to say, I want you to know who's me to know who's asking so that I can look at your chart, but I'm also happy to not say who it is or call you out loud, because I recognize that some of this stuff is personal and some people feel varying degrees of comfort asking questions in an open place like this. But I hope y'all know that this community is amazing. I love each and every one of you. Y'all are all awesome. And I know all of you would not use any information shared in a bad way, right? Like, because we're all just here trying to do the same thing. We're all just trying to here dealing with our stuff, our karmas, our traumas, whatever, and to live a more intentional and authentic and better life having done so. So, yeah. So that's it for the high level overview. And I was going to take some time to talk about Kelly's chart. But since you're not here, I want to give you the chance to come next Thursday, January 4th. I'll be here if you want to talk about it, or also like really any Thursday, or you can tell me between now and then if you're like, just say it on the recording, even if I can't make it live, because it's better if I can just talk to you back and forth. So yeah. So I will see y'all next Thursday. And housekeeping announcement, if you've stuck around this long, I am bringing back live classes in 2024. It's been a whole thing with my barn that we're building here, my yoga barn. It's not quite done, but it's almost there. And so I've been waiting on that before I remake my class schedule, including these classes, right? And in-person classes. So yeah, I suspect for myself and you all as well that after the retrogrades, things like that will feel more clear and get easier. So last little thing I want to say is make sure that you keep your expectations for yourself and those around you somewhat low this week. This week between Christmas and New Year's, even if you don't celebrate Christmas, between solstice and winter solstice and Makar Sankranti, January 14th, really that whole time is a time for deep rest, a time for allowing yourself to just hibernate, or I forget the word for bears that don't actually hibernate, but they torpor. They still go into a state of deep rest. They're not like just sleeping 24 hours a day the whole time, but they still go into a state of deep rest. That's the vibe for another 2 weeks. So I hope you're able to tap into that. I hope you're able to be super compassionate with yourself and others, to just let it be a time of rest. We can't, and that's like what I was saying earlier with the wheel of the year. We can't operate at the same clip year round. And I recognize that our society often expects us to. And so if you recognize that and recognize that you're in a position where you are expected to operate at the same clip in the summer as you do in the winter, then I hope you're able to just find the tiniest bit of gentleness for yourself now and always.